welcome everyone, speakers, moderators, and attendees included. Thank you all for joining today's event. In case you weren't aware, we're about to start the one of many Ask Me Anything sessions that we've been hosting at Deep Tech Showcase over the last couple of months, and going forward we'll be hosting some more. I'm very, very, very excited that today we have two great people with us. We have Max Frischman from Eagle Point Funding, and we have a guest speaker, Matt MacGregor, who's a very active member of our ecosystem, who's also joining. And we're looking forward to hearing more in just a bit. A bit about the Tech Showcase, in case anyone here, in case it's your first event of ours, or you haven't heard what we do and what our focus is. We strive to help deep tech and specifically dual use tech companies go forward with their innovation and really trying to help them commercialize both on the government side and on the commercial side. We do so with in many different ways. We have a very large community, both of founders who created new technology and are creating new technologies, as well as stakeholders from the investors in our community to corporate tech scouts, as well as government agency representatives, as seen here. And our goal is to streamline the process for everyone involved. And by understanding what people are looking for, what pain points exist in different industries, both for the companies who are trying to build out their product and commercialize, and engage with various different federal agencies, as well as corporations. And also for the stakeholder side, who are, they might have certain issues in their organization, problems they're looking to solve, or their own pain points. And we want to help streamline the process for them to find the right partners and find the right companies, and all together kind of create more innovation, and success for really innovative companies. As I said, this is part of a series. We're hosting our next Ask Me Anything event a week from today, December 6th, featuring Max Briggs from NASA SBIR. We host showcases events, which Matt has been to, I believe, at least a couple of times. We have an aerospace and defense showcase coming up in January after the holidays, which will be a little different. The Ask Me Anything sessions are meant to be very, very educational, and not that the showcases aren't, but the main focus is companies come, they pitch their technologies to a very wide panel with various stakeholders from our network, and they get feedback, and it's a great opportunity to come and join. And I'll drop links to all these things in the chat later on. Today's agenda, so that we know where we're going. Right now, we're doing introductions and opening presentations. Max is going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the federal funding arena and introduce himself and Eagle Point Funding before we get started and move on to the main event with Matt MacGregor. We're going to start off with some questions that we have, topics that we think are worth covering with different trends that are going on right now and things that we think will be useful. And then we are very excited to hear the questions that the audience has for us today. So if everyone looks at the bottom of their screen, there's a Q&A button. We invite you to add your questions as they come up into your mind, and then we'll go back and go through them and try to answer them by the order that they were typed in. And without further ado, I'll finish my presentation and we'll move on to Max.
Thanks, Yuval. Thanks so much, Matt, for joining us today as well. My spiel is pretty short. It's just really quickly about the federal R&D funding scenario right now. What we have opportunities opening Q4 and Q1 tends to be the largest amount of opportunities in terms of the SBIR cycle, the small business grants for all different types of technology from all different types of agencies. As you can see on the screen, starting right now over the next couple of months, we have some of the biggest agencies all releasing their small business R&D grant programs. Department of Energy, NASA, DHS, You have NOAA, NIST, DoD, AFWorks, SpaceWorks, NSF. These are just to name some of the bigger ones. And then you have opportunities that are open all the time throughout the entire year. You know, sometimes they're open for 3 months, sometimes they're open for 3 years. So typically right now is a really great time to dive into the world of federal R&D funding. So just to show a little bit what's out there, Yuval, you can hit the next slide. So Eagle Point funding, who are we? What do we do? Where do we fit into the federal R&D grant scene? At the end of the day, we're a grant consultancy. In terms of our scope of work, it breaks down into 2 parts. The first part is identification and navigation. So understanding the company's technology, their R&D roadmap, use cases that they've already defined, as well as bring potential other new use cases for them, and then go out and find all the relevant agencies and R&D opportunities that align with their core technology and potential use cases. The second part of what we're doing is the project management, the grant writing support, and the actual consulting on the application process itself. So really, we're storytellers. We help to find all the opportunities and submit as many opportunities as possible. Next slide. And as I said before, we work with all of our clients on a 9-month-long engagement on a multi-submission strategy. The goal is over 4 to 6 weeks to submit, every 4 to 6 weeks to submit a new opportunity. Times like right now, over these next 3 months, we're going to be cranking out more opportunities than just one every 4 to 6 weeks. But you're virtually working with an assigned grant consultant from our end over that 9-month period. Their job is to find you all the opportunities and help you submit to as many as possible. So that's who we are. That's what we do. That's where we fit into the space. So thanks so much, Yuval, and looking forward to this conversation with Matt.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much. Now we can, get started into the good stuff. So Matt, I think we could start off, before we even get into the questions. I think we'll start off with a brief introduction, or not so brief introduction, your background, where you currently, are in the space. I think that would be a great way to kick things off.
Sure. And yeah, thanks you all for having me. Look forward to the discussion. Yeah, so I work in the the acquisition space, which is kind of a generic term, but my background is in program management, so managed a number of programs, and really have seen the potential. It was too bad that it was on the tail end of when I was leaving government, but I really saw the potential for innovation from smaller business, right? The shifting from the reliance on the largest contractors, and instead trying to use the SBIR program and other innovation sort of mechanisms to bring some of this unique innovation that exists out there and help these companies either become defense sector, viable defense sector entities, or commercialize and go off and do great things in other areas. So, lots of different paths for companies depending on what their goal is. So yes, really saw a lot of potential there. And the last few years, about 3 years ago, I moved to MITRE. And so a lot of our work right now is sort of advising programs, working on policy and guidance. And what we really want to try to do is make sure we can craft contracts, have strategies that think about small business as part of that, early planning, so that it's not an afterthought, and it's not not something that they might see a really good opportunity, but they just don't have the structure right to enable, the incorporation of that. So a lot of it is just trying to make sure that DoD writ large, what I'm going to talk about today is really DoD writ large, is how are we postured today, my perceptions of it, and then where are we moving towards, and what are those things we can kind of do to help us take advantage of that better. So at least give sort of the foundation of where a lot of these vendors are, the environment they're going to operate in, where they can maybe maximize some things to make it as easy as possible in the government to take advantage of it. So yeah, so I guess I'll leave it at that, and see what questions we have.
Yeah. So Matt, I think that's a great, an awesome summary and a great segue into this first one is, what do you feel are some of the current pain points for companies that are trying to engage with the DoD? And, how do you go about tackling those pain points? Whether it's you, whether it's the company, or any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that once again, it does depend on the goal of the company, right? I think we generally are in the space where if you want to get a phase 1 or a phase 2 SBIR, and you have a semi-viable product, you can probably get in there. You can probably get that if you know how to navigate that process. I think we see there's more and more successes out there. There's more open topics, more agencies kind of taking advantage of it. I'd say the challenge and the pain point that we hear the most often is that they get to a certain point, but it's hard to make that next leap to, getting any real, quantity buy dollar, higher dollar buy from the government. And so I think there is a point that's pretty greased, like the skids are greased, but then it gets really tough. And then even if you do get connected sometimes with a government sponsor or government customer that, they may give you a sponsor you for a phase 2, but they don't really have a glide path. Even if they want to, they don't always have a glide path to kind of take advantage of it. So those are the kind of things that I think the department is starting to get better at. I think where these companies can make it a little bit easier is to really understand where the government is postured to take advantage of that. Is that something that the government can do on its own? Are they likely going to be relying on another contractor? Is this too small to be a single capability by itself? Or can you commoditize it in some way so that it can be put on, an IDIQ or some type of structure like that, so the government can more easily get access to it?
Awesome.
So yeah.
It definitely seems like, just from the feedback that we've gotten working with our clients over the number of years, is that it definitely seems like the hardest leap is going from the phase 2 or 2B or 3 to the actual commercialization. That's the biggest piece of feedback. And it kind of goes into the next question about, most companies that we're engaging with that are seeking the federal customers through the SBR engagement. What do you see? How do you see the process to commercialization for those companies?
Well, one of the things we have heard from, the VC community is that if a company is looking to commercialize, right? So there's a decision. I think companies can either look at the defense sector and say, that's where I want to operate. I want to optimize my products for the military, and basically have cognizance of what that entails, right? Sometimes that can be a bunch of additional requirements, right? You need to, ruggedize this thing, or, their military is looking for a particular spec item. Or you can kind of say, I want to commercialize, but if that is appropriate, especially when you think about a digital product like an AI or, kind of software kind of application, maybe, well, there is an application there that DoD could use it if they want to. Or maybe DoD is not the big thing. They're using the SBIR program to kind of get started. So what we've heard from the DC community is that it is viewed positively. Hopefully that stays that way. It is viewed positively for a company to get a SBIR. It shows that there's at least some demand signal out there. So I think we are being supportive of commercialization in that way. I think I think there's a recognition, right? The SBIR program has a bunch of goals. One of those goals is commercialization, right? It's looking at the broader national economy. And then one of those is, how can you help the department that's funding that? So either way, if this helps them get some VC funding and they go off and do great things in the commercial sector, that's a win. If there's something that can be applied to a DoD problem, that's another win. So
at the end of the day, getting the non-dilutive funding for your R&D is fantastic, but landing the government and an agency or a unit as a customer, that's something invaluable. Absolutely. Okay, so then the next question is, where do you see the DoD moving towards regarding engagement with new tech in the upcoming year? We can leave the political opinions aside, But I think that the current administration versus the past administration influences a lot of this as well. So what do you personally see as the direction for this upcoming year?
Well, I think one thing that you're seeing is actually program offices are starting to become aware, and obviously it was not that long ago where programs were like cyber what, like cyber was not on the front of their minds at all as a pathway. So I think now programs, and I've actually talked to some that are actually sponsoring cyber projects and actually looking and monitoring them to see if they reach a certain level of maturation, they're ready as you can be in terms of funding and other kind of challenges, but they're monitoring it to pull that tech in if it reaches the point where it becomes viable for them. So I think that's a huge step forward, and that's the optimal situation. If you are a vendor and you have a customer, a government sponsor who's sort of touching base with you and saying, "Oh, how's that coming?" Or have you solved this challenge? Or you're at this point. That's the optimal solution. I'm seeing more of that. I think you're also seeing more offices, innovation offices, right? Like AFWorks is was one of the first movers, but the Army RCTO, Naval X, and and different government agencies now are actually sponsoring cyber program projects and looking to ease that pathway to be able to scale if necessary. So you have some of these innovation offices that are a little bit more proactive than they were in the past, I'd say, just because in the past they were like, well, let's fund these, let's get these things awarded, but they didn't always have the tail end figured out. And now there's a lot more focus on the tail end, because when it comes to, I think, particularly those things that are easily scalable, digital solutions that I kind of will highlight again, I think those are the easiest things. If it's hardware and things like that, that's the other thing we're looking at, right, is those incentives for some of these mid and larger size companies to say, ultimately, they're going to have to integrate some of those hardware type items into a larger solution. And so how do you create those relationships between a small that has cyber data rights, right, which are unique, and that company, and maybe some companies want to be bought out by that larger one, and that may work fine. Some want to stay viable, and so making sure that exists as a possibility. I think there's a lot of great movement in that direction, but we of course have a long way to go.
Awesome. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit in that answer and throughout the past couple of answers, but for you, are there any technology priorities in 2023, and what do you think those are? You were talking about software a little bit, but even when it comes down to specific use cases or directions, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, man, the department is in a modernization spike, right? So we are at this point where a lot of our legacy systems are sort of tailing off, and there's a sort of recognition that we have to get after some of these problems that have not been solved. And so I think you're going to see a push in so many different spaces. R&E publishes their technology modernization areas. I think those are always good to monitor, but to get more granular, I think what you put up, Max, on some of those BAs monitoring those open topics and seeing what particular things are, is there an optic problem that we're trying to solve for a satellite? Is there a LiDAR issue for some of the autonomous vehicles, and so monitoring, I think, that space so you can start to see what the more detailed needs is really the only way to go, right? Because the department does not have a coherent list of every single thing across every single program that might be of interest. And I would say at this point, everything is of interest, And so in 23, I do think AI, we've been playing around with it for a little while. I think that's going to be a push. There's enough legislation and things that are pushing the department. The CDAO was just stood up. And so data, the ability to ingest data and process it and broker that and, use AI in unique ways for all the different military problems is going to be a continued focus. Hypersonics and all those kinds of things are going to be, really critical. So I think, Yeah, it's everything.
No, Matt. So I think it's an awesome point because again, I said this to you before, but like leaving political opinions aside, let's look at the last administration and what was their focus. What did they issue executive orders on? It was AI and cybersecurity. So we started over the last couple of years of that administration seeing more and more funding going to AI and cyber, and it's not like they're decreasing that, they're just increasing, but that was their focus. Now this new administration, what is their focus? It's clean, green, renewable energy technologies, and we're starting to see that. Another big thing, just touching on something that you were saying, Matt, is the open topics. You were talking about AFWERX open topic, and I believe the DoD came out and said that by 2024, every single Department of Defense or all the big agencies in the Department of Defense had to have some sort of open topic. Why is that? In my opinion, it's because AFWERX has been kind of leading the game in getting the best technologies funded, because it is open, right? You come to me, you tell me what your problems are. You tell me how you're going to solve my problems. So I think it's really interesting to see that all the other agencies are now adapting that even more on a higher scale.
Yeah, and I think that was a big push, and I think DIU sort of showed that was, that was where they were getting real money from the innovation sector, was giving those open topics. At the same time, I do think there's a lot of value with agencies getting specific and saying these are my particular areas, because then you have a little bit more granular understanding of the problem, and you don't always. While it would be great to have every cyber vendor be able to get access to the user base and just sit with users and do that the design thinking kind of problem set, you don't always get that opportunity. So yeah, I think agencies, program offices, PO offices, however you want to divide it up, should have an open topic where they're getting fresh ideas, but then also being granular about the challenges that they're having. So that's kind of what I advise.
No matter what, they're always going to know what their challenges are, right? That they can see right in front of them. And why not have those out there for the specific, solicitations? But kind of what you were saying, it's always good to have someone else from the outside come to you and say, hey, I've developed this, or I can develop this. I'm looking at what you're doing right now, and I think I can do it better. Or you're not even doing this right now. We'll definitely see over this next year and the years following with these new open topics, how that all plays out. One thing that we actually didn't touch on yet, and over the past month or two, we at Eagle Point have been getting this question a lot, and we've been talking to a lot of different people about it, is what do you think about the new SBIR reauthorization guidelines, and has it affected your priorities in any way or anything of that matter?
No, I don't expect that to be impactful for most. There may be some, like the high volume, if you're submitting like really high volume amounts, and maybe you hit one of those thresholds. So Congress put some of that in there. So far, I haven't seen the details on the security vetting. I mean, I think some of that stuff is already in the works anyway. That's going to be a focus area. I think you're going to have to recognize that supply chain risk management, and being able to understand sort of foreign influence, we're just in that world now. So I think we'll see how onerous some of those become. I hope that we stay smart in the government about how we do that, make that efficient, so it's not a prolonged process or doesn't delay people getting contracts. But as of right now, I haven't seen any impact from it. But I'd love to hear if folks are having impacts, though. I mean, that's good feedback too.
We haven't. I mean, listen, in terms of kind of what we've seen agencies post their opportunities anyways and say, we're not worried about this. We know the money's coming in. We're going to just roll with the punches anyways. So if the agencies aren't worried about it, I don't think that we should be. I don't think that companies should be either.
I think that's one of the things that we're going to see also just on these sessions, specifically doing with NASA and then speaking with the DOE, and then we had an event with Army Applications Lab, and all of them I know are looking at it in a different way, especially like the open topics and stuff like that. It's interesting to see that.
Yeah. So there was a question in the chat by Brady Hall that I wanted to hit, because I think it is a good point. Like, one of the things that the government still has improvements on, and I know AFWorks has continually done streamlining and trying to get better at this, because there were still, some of the case studies that were done showed that it still was taking too much to get a SBIR award, especially at the low dollar amounts. And so it is true, the SBIR factory is, I think some people like Ben Van Roo and others really kind of brought some of that to light, that, just churning out awards, doesn't always generate the innovation that's needed. So I think the government does have some improvements to make that as easy as possible, especially at the phase 1 level, so that a company is not spending really hard-earned limited dollars trying to get entry into the government, especially when you're only getting 50, 100K. You shouldn't have to spend 300K to get that. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. The other point here is seeing companies using SBIR as a milestone. Yeah, so I think we talked about that. That's great. Yeah, it's not going to get you enough to start a company, but something to get a viable plan to get to a product, I think is generally what's being looked for there. So yeah, you're not gonna create a company with some of the phase 1, phase 2 amounts of money. But anyway, I thought that was a good point. There's work that can be done there. Regarding Harold's comment here. Sorry, Yuval, I'm just going to jump in. Is that, if you don't mind?
That's totally fine.
Yeah,
If you'd
yeah.
like,
No,
if you want, I can read them. We can go one by one, and both of you can answer, or whatever they're directed to. We can go through them.
If everyone can see them, I think I'll just call out the person's name. Yeah.
Go for it.
So Harold.
Yeah. Just go for it. Just and say whichever one you want to answer.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Harold Lichtenstein. Regarding dual use invention, especially ones where the tuning determines the application where being understood would make it a military device. Is it frowned upon to use the non-dilutive federal funding for potential R&D in civil military applications simultaneously? I mean, if he's talking about SBIR money, you're using it for whatever product you've put into your proposal. So yeah, there's an expectation that if you can use it civilly and militarily, that's great. Those are both part of the goals of the SBIR program. And one thing I will say on the civil side is it would, one thing I think that can be looked at more potentially, we have a tendency, I think, DoD and the civil government side to have a really kind of hard line. We don't really do a good job of coordinating, but sometimes something that could be a product for a military application could also be applied to something for the intelligence community, could also be applied for something for DHS, FAA.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
so definitely keep an eye out for those. I think it'd be really nice if those that are playing in just the AFWorks space, because they're most familiar with that, definitely venture out and see what the other needs are out there.
Matt, I think it's important to remember, we see the exact same thing, is the core technology can be applicable to a ton of different agencies. Yes, typically if the Navy's interested, Air Force is going to be, or Army, or you'll have some cross agency. But even outside of that intelligence community, you can go into DHS, DARPA, you can go into, again, depending on the technology, you can go into DOE or NASA or NSF. The core technology can stay the same, but the use case, what it's being applied to, that's what's going to change from one to one.
Yeah, no, exactly.
There's a follow-up here by Harold, it's a bit of a technical question. I don't know, maybe both of you have a different insight on it, but is there a centralized resource for seeing the mentioned open topic solicitations and the problems needed to be solved?
Well, there's always a centralized resource called the PV process, but no, I think what you do have right now is you do have various innovation pods. So OSD manages some particular innovation funds. Rapid prototyping fund is getting re-energized, or rapid innovation funding is getting re-energized. And you're seeing, Raider, and there's some other pots, AppFit, that's meant for more production. And there's a bunch of smaller ones. those are available. With 2B, you do have some matching funds from the government. So that's a pot of money that, that's being allocated. Usually that comes from a program line. But then there are some prototype funds. So that's a 6-4, it's called 6-4 money. There are some different prototype lines that each service, sometimes sub-organizations have, that they can use for certain technology areas that they've gotten congressional support for. And so there are pots of money. There is no central pot that, just magically can be used. Unfortunately, DoD, we're still, kind of micromanaged in terms of the budget, 1,700 some budget line items, and some of them extremely discrete. Some of them have a little bit more flexibility. So yeah, I think the key is the solution that your product is likely to go in is, is very precise and only applies to a couple of things. You could probably actually sort of fish through the budget docs and say, oh, these are the programs, here's the money they have, and you can see how tight that budget line is. Most of those budget line items do not have management reserve. Those programs are funded to an estimate, and so there's usually not a lot of wiggle room. But in some cases, they do have some buffer. Some work might get deferred, and so they have more money in 1 year. And that might be an opportunity for them to onboard something if it makes sense and if it fits the requirements that they have. So no, it's not clean. Resourcing is going to be a problem for the foreseeable future. PBE Commission is going to come out with some recommendations here in the next year or two, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can just go with Russ here since I had that. What are some industry? Oh, okay. Industry pain points. I think we talked about that one, right? Do we answer? Okay. As a battery cell startup, what's the best way to initiate dialogue with the right context? So for things like that, where battery cell is a battery technology, there's a lot of money being devoted to that. Actually, if you look at even like the Navy's S&T budget, that's a recognized problem. Like batteries are a continuing kind of challenge, and we haven't sort of taken that next quantum leap for batteries. So yeah, if you're a startup and you actually think you have a great solution, I would start talking to the labs, because the labs do a lot of work with the commercial sector. They may or may not know about what technology you're tapping into, and if they don't know, maybe some good opportunities there to get in on the S&T side. If it's something where you have advanced it and you have an application, you're like, here's the battery pack. If you stick this in, a thing, you can go off and run with it, and we have a production line ready to go. That's a different story. I think at that point, you have a huge customer base to go talk to, because there's a lot of programs that have battery challenges, and you should probably talk to. There are central people in each department that are looking at that manage generators and energy sources and things like that. And so there are some contacts there if you actually have a solution that's ready to go. But I think in most cases, if you're still working on that because you're coming through the cyber world, I would talk to the S&T community, because that's where a lot of that work is sort of being done at this point. But yeah, it just depends on where you're at there. But I would say, yes, there are some good contacts that we could probably connect you with, depending on where you're at there. Is it possible to protect intellectual property when selling replacement products with improvements, or maybe innovative repairs for existing products? So yeah, if this is something where a system's already out there and you're looking to get into the logistics supply chain, but you're worried about intellectual property, this is where the commoditization of a product is helpful. So basically, if you can sell it commercially, it's something that you could put in a catalog. There's been some loosening of the restrictions of what a commercial item is, commercial item of a type, and things like that. So there's been some good movement in this area, that if you're something that's already out there that's can be bought, there's new language that actually opens it up even more. Then I think you could probably get away with selling that as a commercial item of a type, and putting that extra improvement in there. So that would make it compelling, and you could compete with probably a legacy vendor, because there's probably, in that case, there might only be a single source. So you would actually be bringing in some competition to something that's typically sole source. So yeah, definitely can protect your intellectual property, but that will have to go through that commercial item determination potentially, or you're going to have to work with a vendor to make sure that that part is fully certified and has all the same sort of, things as that other part. And so that could get challenging. So yeah, that was a little bit nuanced of an answer, but I'd say yes, you can, but you have to work it right. I'm not seeing any real action from the Army Application Lab or Naval Access compared to DIU. Yeah, I mean, I think for the Army Application Lab is more early stage stuff. I think RCTO is probably the better option. I think that's where you're going to see most of the server stuff come out of, although AEL does have some stuff. So yeah, DIU and AFWorks are clearly, they are, they're front of the line in terms of the amount of requests that you'll see of industry. They're leading, they've been leading the charge, but you do see the Army and Navy getting more into that. So there's been a surge, I'd say, over the last few years. But yeah, DIU and AFWorks are still the exemplars. What is the best way to get in touch with PMs about technologies that are already high TRL that may be too developed for cyber but could benefit the agency? Yeah, so if you have something, and this gets back to like the battery question, if you have something that's ready to go, not talking about like you have an idea, but you have a product that's has a production line. So if somebody wanted to buy it, they could actually buy it. Yeah, that's the time to get in with PMs. I think PMs, the one thing I'll say in general, just give you a PM perspective, PMs have so many demands on their time and they're struggling to get through the day with just all of the challenges of like, I got all these contracts, I'm getting a million different requests from the Pentagon and all these offices, that if you come in with something early stage, it's really hard for them to get excited about it. And not that your product, your idea is not great, right? Your idea is probably amazing and all that, but if you come in, they're gonna be a little bit shorter attention span on that kind of stuff because they do see a lot of that and they know that they can't use it in the near term, so it doesn't help them for all their immediate problems. If you come in instead though with something that you're at the production level and you're ready to sell, that you're going to get a lot more attention, and especially if you know that is something that is directly applicable or how you can improve what they're working on, and that you can do it in a way that doesn't totally disrupt the program. Like, hey, this is a modular thing, you can insert it in this way, it's it can merge with your tech stack, and if you can do that, you're going to get some attention, and you will you will be more likely to get those follow-on contracts. So I'd say that is the key for that scaling effect, is to make it as easy as possible in the PM if you know what they're getting after, and have it as high TRL as possible. You're not always going to be able to do the testing because you might not get access to the data or the ranges or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But if you can show that it's mature and ready to go and ready to be bought, that helps your case significantly. The best way to get in touch, this is where I think the accelerators and some of the cyber companies that help connect, do the tech to connect, is invaluable, because there's a lot of PMs out there. So one way you can do it is the Army actually has a really good site. We can go on and see a lot of the existing programs. Air Force and Navy don't have as good of one, but go and look at the budget docs. I really do think the budget docs are a great resource. So you can go on the comptroller site of each of the services, scroll through, look for technology words that you think are applicable to what you're trying to get after, and you can write down those programs. And sometimes it is hard to get program POCs. I'm even, I work for the government and I can sometimes not track down PMs half the time. So sometimes that can be challenging. You might have to just do some deep Google searching, find an article, get a name, try to reach out and to one of the offices and see if you can get connected, or one of us can help. But it is not easy. So yeah, I guess that's just the way it is. There's not a master list of all PMs out there that's accessible to the public. And so there is some homework there, but yeah. Something along the lines of an advanced material with massive range of applications is better to pursue something that's its own wider net, like an OTA consortium, or attempt to target the best possible single customer and focus on that. So an advanced material. Yeah, so this is where you get into There might be an OTA consortium. There are some that do have like a material element to them. That could be helpful to become part of that. I think the consortiums are being used a lot more. I think the government, because it doesn't always have the resources to manage OTs themselves, are turning to the consortium, ATIs, whatever, ASI, to help them. And so never hurts to be a part of that. I do encourage also that if you have something like a material where it's not particular to one particular problem set, that is where I would get in with the labs. So the national labs, the service labs, I think connecting with them would be really beneficial because they're oftentimes working on those types of problems that have wide applicability, and they understand some of the more unique challenges. And I will say the labs in the past, with the Navy lab, I'd say being excluded because they've always been a little bit more close to their customer, but the other labs are sometimes disconnected from the programs. And I've observed that is slowly being solved. I think there's a little bit more tighter connection between the S&T and the program community, advanced developer community, whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, go talk to the labs if it's something like a new material that's going to be used on hypersonics or armor or like that kind of thing. I think you probably don't want to go to one particular program office. It might be best. The other option there too would be to go to a prime and say, I have this new material, and see what you can work out there, because they may be working on some next generation thing, next generation product that could tie into. So, those relationships are challenging, but might be the way to go. Are there any DoD programs looking at improving the air quality in aircraft and other troop transfer? Well, we always have SBIRNI. There's SBIRNI requirements are still out there, chem bio radiation. So they always have to meet those if there's going to be people inside of them. So yeah, I don't know about improving the air quality, but there are requirements in general for air quality, particularly when it comes to certain types of radiation, chemicals, biological agents, and things like that. So yeah, so there might be an applicability to that. I don't know about just like in general improving air quality, making it less particulate. I'm not aware of that, but yeah. For phase 1 SBIR, does it help to have a letter of intent or MOU from the DoD and civilian sector? If yes, how many should you aim for? Yeah, those really come into play with phase 2 as far as I'm aware. But yeah, it never hurts to have that. I think AFWERX now requires it. So yeah, if you can get a letter of intent, that would be really, really helpful. And I think if you're trying to be commercialized, I think that would help you too. But in general, if you are trying to use DoD as your primary customer, I would try to make that letter of intent as specific as possible. Like what is the government looking for? Is there a particular requirement that they need set? Like really try to make that letter of intent as granular as possible in terms of, okay, if I get it to this point, is that going to generate interest? Because I think in general, it's easy for programs to sign letters of intent that are just like, sure, I'm generally interested in this topic area. But if you can get a little bit more out of them, I think it'll make your life a little bit easier when you're actually are trying to go back and sell that or get that phase 2B. So yeah, maybe my point there being less generic can help your outcome.
I'll just add on top of that, if we're talking about MOUs, so we run, like, as you know, Matt, we run a cohort every cycle called the MOU Club, specifically for companies who are looking to get a signed MOU. The way we look at it is start early and try and get as many as possible, because obviously the more support you can come and show is only going to work in your favor. And secondly, things sometimes get delayed, things change, people leave their positions obviously all the time. And it's always good to have support from different areas. We even encourage companies to get support from, even if they're going after a phase 2 with AFWERX, and they can get an MOU through a previous contact that they have in the U.S. Army. We 100% recommend companies go after it and come with as many chips in their hands as possible to the grant.
Yeah, particularly too, if you have, if you have a phase one, or if you have an LOI or an MOU from, the Navy, the Air Force, and some civil agency, that just gives you more opportunities to advance to a phase two in that particular agency. So yeah, I'd say in general, it doesn't hurt to have more. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Sure, Brady. Yeah, Chad, I'm not like a battery expert or anything, but sure, we can try to find the right people to talk to.
Awesome. So I think that's the end of the questions. I think there were really great questions, and there were a bunch just there at the end that actually covered some areas that we didn't touch on at all up until then. So I think that's pretty good. I'd like to thank you, Max and Matt, for taking time and joining us. I think it's super helpful to do as many events like these as possible, just for the general community and people who come to educate themselves. I think it's great. If there's anything at MITRE, Matt, that you want to talk about, and anything that's going on now, feel free. If there's anything you think that, companies maybe who are specifically looking to learn more about MITRE, or anything like that, we're happy to give you the platform to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. So, we do have a bridging innovation program where we try to understand the tech space and all the different opportunities that are out there, and connect with a government customer through our MITRE connections. But we do our best on that front, and so that is one area. But of course, in general, just trying to make sure that when there is a problem that we know about, and we know about the tech, we can connect that dot. And then also on the acquisition and contracting side is, we continue to try to structure strategies so that CIBR, the potential innovation from these vendors can be utilized. So yeah, we do have a couple initiatives underway. I can send you some more information on the bridging innovation aspect if you want. But
yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to distribute it to people. If you want us to add it to a follow-up email to the people who joined, we're happy to do that. That would be, that sounds super relevant. That's pretty much it, unless there's any more. I see there if you want to answer a couple more, I think there's I guess one more. The DoD see the clean energy, more specifically the hydrogen market, to play a major role across the next couple of years or decades. That could be for our DOE AMA on December 13th. We'll probably be covering that, but if you have any insight, Matt, please go ahead.
Well, for sure. If you just look at, I would just draw your attention to like the optionally manned fighting vehicle. They are trying to get to a place where they are not as reliant on fuel. So, electric and hydrogen, I think are going to be big players. And there are more clean energy sort of guidance coming down, given the administration priorities and things like that. So I think you'll see that shift a little bit depending on the administration, but in general, the direction is to get to more sustainable fuels that, we don't have the reliance where we have to have huge trucks, trucking across like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, where, tanks were guzzling so much fuel that they, were basically potentially running out and causing all kinds of issues. So I think the Army wants to get out of that. The Navy is definitely going to look at that as they have more unmanned vessels coming into play. So yes, I think the demand signal will be very high for that in different applications, depending on the requirements for the system. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to stay on in case anyone has questions about specific funding opportunities. We have just a bit more time in the session, and we're happy to talk about our community if anyone has any questions, or about what Eagle Point does and Deep Tech Showcase represent. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. It was a real pleasure, and we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. See you.
So if anyone has any other questions regarding Eagle Point funding, or Max, if you want to share anything else about upcoming opportunities or what's going on.
I think Yuval, from everything that we heard from this this webinar with Matt, it seems like, you know, companies should be taking advantage of the R&D funding that's out there. Doesn't really matter how or what stage your technology is in, unless it's just a beginning stage of proof of concept. If you have, you know, developed proof of concept, working prototype, commercialized technology, you should try to take advantage of this R&D funding from all the different agencies out there. We can help you do so. We, as I said before, you know, we're grant consultants that help to find all the relevant opportunities, as well as do the project management and grant writing behind the applications themselves. So I'm more than happy to connect with anyone and everyone. The only types of technology that we don't work with are life science related, but every other type of technology we're open to working with and have worked with in the past. So, you know, my link to my email and I believe to my Calendly is also posted by Asher in the chat, and Yuval posted it there as well. So you can just use that to fill it out, and we can get a call scheduled to dive deeper into your company, your tech, your R&D roadmap, your use cases, and discuss which agencies and opportunities might be most relevant for you.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yuval. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.